Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 21st Design Journal. I'm very excited to be here. I can't believe that we are all the way up to 21 of these and that we still have things to keep talking about, but we have tons of cool things to talk about today. As you know, our play test is currently underway. We are getting a ton of great feedback back. Actually, more feedback than I thought we were going to get. And that's awesome because it means that people are checking this stuff out and telling us what they think of it. Probably 90% of what we're hearing from folks is very positive. And so that's very exciting to me as well. There's a lot that we need to still work out. There's a lot that we still need to clean up, but it's great stuff. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me start with my usual opening sequence. First thing I'm going to do is my usual mail call. Now, this isn't exactly mail call, but I ran across this accidentally the other night. This is All-Star Adventure, my first role-playing game I ever designed back in 1985. It's a percentile-based system. I don't know how well it plays. I'm going to actually try to bring it to the table and try it out for fun at some point. I'll let you guys know if my 1985 design skills were on par with where I am today. Hopefully, we're a little better now as we're doing things. But yeah, my very first ever role-playing game that I designed. Also in actual mail call, Star Trek Adventures. Yeah, not just Star Trek Adventures, but Lower Decks, which is maybe one of my favorite Star Treks. I mean, Strange New Worlds is also amazing, but I love Lower Decks, and I couldn't believe it when they came out with a Lower Decks book. It just blew my mind, and I knew that there was no way I was going to resist getting this. So this is from Modiphius Games. I've just gotten to thumb through it and take a look at some of the fun pictures and check out Clippy and stats for, or not Clippy, Badgie, stats for Badgie. If you watch Star Trek Lower Decks, you'll know what I mean. If you don't, why don't you watch it? It's an awesome show. You should be watching this. So that's my big mail call this week, is my Star Trek Lower Decks book. So I'm looking forward to reading that. Also, in terms of what we've been playing lately, actually, believe it or not, it's game night tonight. I'm up here doing this, and the rest of the group is downstairs gaming right now. So we're only going to be going for half an hour tonight for sure. I know usually we do about 30 minutes to an hour, but I'm going to stick to 30 because the guys are downstairs waiting for me to roll some dice and play some more Cool Name. We just took a break so I could come up and talk to all of you. However, what they're playing at the moment, which is a very fun game, is a game called Nemesis. All right, so Nemesis is by a company called Rebel and Awaken Realms, and it is a great alien-style board game. Honestly, it's pretty deadly, as you would expect from an alien-style board game, but we absolutely have had fun playing it in the past, and so they're rolling out another round of it. Well, see how long they can last while I'm up here doing this tonight. So that's my news on what I've been up to. So let's get back to talking about Cool Name RPG, which is what you came here to hear about anyway. Another thing I did want to mention, though, I knew there was something else I meant to mention. I recently recorded a podcast with Halfling and the Spaceman. As soon as that comes out, I'll let you guys know. We talk a little bit about Cool Name RPG and about what's coming next and about gaming stuff in general. It should be very cool. So that happened recently as well, and I'll get you guys the information once that's all said and done. So let's talk about a little bit about Cool Name and about the playtest that's going on. So playtesting has been great. We've gotten amazing feedback from folks. Folks have done a great job. Thank you to all of you who have playtested. Thank you to all of you who have shared your thoughts so far. I can't wait to hear from more of the folks, because I know I've talked to some folks who are like, yeah, I still need a little more time. That's okay. I'm not taking the survey down anytime soon. We're probably going to leave it up for probably a week or two, right? And so that people can get to it and have time to fill it out and get their gaming in. Things that have come out of that so far, just some of a few of the highlights. And the first one, like I said earlier, is that people are liking the system, which is amazing, because that's really key. If everyone came back and went like, yeah, this sucks, right? We'd be in a lot of trouble and we have to like really rethink what we're doing. But what it tells me is that the core fundamental of the mechanic works. There's a lot we need to work out. One of the things that we need to work out, and tonight's really going to be me highlighting a lot of the problems that I'm trying to solve and letting you guys percolate and think about these as well, because on Discord, on Facebook, you can come and share your thoughts. Let us know what your solutions to these problems are, right? So tonight's going to be, in true design journal fashion, I'm trying to solve problems lately more than anything else. And one of the problems is what sort of a scale of action scores is going to be an appropriate scale. Now, we don't want to be going up to where people are rolling like 7 dice and trying to add those together and everything, because that at that point gets very unwieldy. It's not really easy to play when you're sitting there trying to suddenly simple math becomes incredibly hard when you're at the table and everyone's watching you and waiting for you to add up all your dice. So we want to keep the dice count low. We also want to make sure that we don't just inflate things for the sake of inflation. At the same time, we want to make sure there's enough scale to the game, right? We want to make sure that, you're not sitting there like going, well, if 2 and 3 and 4 are normal, up to 5 is normal human. Is that enough? Is 2 to 5 enough to really give you the gamut of the human condition? Or does that really keep it too simplistic? I don't know the answer to that yet. I mean, on one hand, I'm a guy who I love my GURPS, I love my hero, I love my crunchy, detailed, mathematically sound. This is mathematically sound as well, but you know what I'm saying. I like my stuff where there's lots of minor tweaks. I enjoy playing Rollmaster, all of those sorts of games. But I also enjoy a game that focuses on what's really important, what you need 80% of the time. If you think about it kind of like the iPhone design, which one of their whole ideas was that you have this 80-20 where 80% of the time you only need 20% of the functionality. And that's what I'm talking about with this design is we need to ask ourselves most days at the game table, what do you need? So I'm still thinking we're in the right range, but I still need to make sure of that. And I'm going to be looking for all of you as you play and as we get into the second round of play test to let me know if that's enough of a spectrum of scores for this to work. We're still looking at 3 as being sort of our base score. And I should warn everybody that if this is your first time watching, you might want to roll back a few because I'm just going to be diving straight into the nitty gritty this time around and getting into it. We're still looking at 3 being sort of the skilled human, and then I'm also trying to keep the skills on the same scale as the abilities, because I think it's important to say like a 3 skill is about the same as a 3 attribute in terms of how much better or worse than normal is it. Right? I think that that's going to make it easier for people to jump in and have a sense of what numbers to use when they're running the game. So that's a big thing for us. Another thing that came up is that some folks don't like rolling 1 die so much, which is interesting since many games are based on rolling a single die. But people are like, I really want to roll 2 dice. And you don't start rolling 2 dice until you get up to, I believe it's a 6, right? Where you're rolling 2d6. So unfortunately, the question we have to ask ourselves, is it okay if you're just rolling 1 die? Is that D12 okay? Or is it not fun to be rolling just a D12 in your game? And even if it's completely acceptable from a mathematical and from a game perspective, if it's not as enjoyable, we have to rethink it. So that's another thing we're going to have to take a look at and try to figure out with everyone. My biggest concern right now is that we do have a pretty good mathematical scale on how things scale out. And I want to be a little careful about breaking that because I really can't reinforce how much time I spent doing the math on that. So we'd end up with something that actually scaled well over time. So I really want us to look at it and see if we can make it work in some fashion, but we'll see. Another thing that I've found is that people are finding it very easy to apply their own rules tweaks to this core mechanic. This is probably one of the things that I'm the happiest about. I already talked about this last week as well, but I got to tell you, this is one of the things I keep seeing, not necessarily in people saying I was able to apply my own mechanics and my own rules, but people literally saying, here's the cool rule I made up and added onto it without any trouble at all. And I'm like, this is what we want, right? We want to see people doing this creative exploration of the rules and offering things. Like I would love to see like someone put up their own sort of rules module of just some additional MOs and how they could work with some special abilities. That was super cool. And to the person who posted that, I am terribly, terribly sorry that I did not write your name down. I will credit you next time for being an awesome person who put that together and shared it. But yeah, that's something that, I think that is just the best thing right now that we're seeing. So I encourage everyone to keep being creative and coming up with their own ideas and their own things that they want to do with it. I encourage people to keep trying to press the limits and see what they can make the game do, or if it breaks at certain points. These are all things that we're going to want to see. Now, lots of people got into combat. And I'm really glad to hear that, because one of the things that we do want to look at is how can we create a combat system that rewards players for good rolling. Now, rewarding someone for luck isn't necessarily right, necessarily a good goal in general, but the point is that when you roll really well, that represents your character surprising you by doing something super cool, and you want to get rewarded for that, right? I mean, you roll this awesome hit and you like open end and everything, and then you're like, roll a d4 for your dagger, and it's takes all the fun out of it. So what I want to do is look at this system where you can compare the differences and use that for damage. And that's one of the big things that I'm going to be exploring with this upcoming second roll or playtest document. We're going to be exploring some of these combat options. Now, what I'm not sure about, and I'm going to actually be asking a few of our consulting designers about, is how dangerous is it to offer multiple options in a single playtest document? Is that distracting? Does that make it hard to playtest? Are you better off doing one and then a week later do another? Or do you put them both in and say, try these two means of finding damage and see which one works for you? I'm not really sure what the right choice is. And this is a place where we're all going to get to learn as we go along with this. So yeah, definitely want to see this with the combat and see how that plays out in terms of damage, because I love that concept and I love the way that played out. Now, at our table, one of the ways it played out is that we had most of the time people were doing a few points of damage and then a few points and defeat the goblin, right? But other times you get these amazing attacks that just knock the goblin for a loop. And I mean, it was just about people wanted to cheer. And to me, when you want to cheer at the table, that's a great moment in the game, right? So I do really like that. And I think it can work. One of the things too that I don't want to fall into the trap of is there's this sense that extremes are not necessarily good, that an extreme damage on an attack is something that's going to break the game. And the way that this came up, and I'm trying to remember who I was talking to about it, but we were talking about it being, talking about this whole idea that, yeah, how often is that actually going to happen though, right? It's not going to happen that often. And if it doesn't happen that often, it's kind of awesome, right? So, I think that we can make this work where we can have these extreme levels coming up from both sides of the table and creating these sort of epic moments in the game. And if you think about movies that we're trying to emulate, these action, down to earth action films and action movies and action stories, there is a lot of that, right? But what's different is the character can recover, right? We give the character a way to recover when it's not going their way. So that's one of the things that we want to look at, is maybe we don't try to stop them from having these epic moments. Maybe instead we make sure that the story and the character can recover from them in the same way that an action movie does. Because if you think of the sequences of an action movie, like say Die Hard or Indiana Jones, it's these big explosive moments, one after the other, right? With little short rests in between. And in those explosive moments, big things happen, but then we reset it. And then we reset it with our in-between act, and then we get back to another explosive moment. And I think that we can make that work. And so I'm looking to you guys, when I start talking about things that I'm looking to hear from folks, I want to hear people's thoughts on how we could make that work, how those explosive moments could create a different style of gaming experience than you get in the more incremental style stories that you see in many role-playing games. Because incremental is fun, it can work, it creates this sort of Tolkien-esque feel to the adventure. But could we do something different? That's super fun. And good evening to Heath from Heath Geekverse. Heath is here with us tonight. That was my other mail call. I'm gonna have to share that book next week. I have a cool book to share with you guys from Heath that is very awesome. And I got a mail call this week. So next week I'll bring that one out. But hello to Heath. And I say this every week, watch Heath's channel on YouTube. It has awesome stuff on it. Also, I always forget to say this, like and subscribe. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know how it affects the algorithm, but if nothing else, it makes me feel good, like you're actually watching and getting something out of it. So, hey, maybe just like and subscribe for my sake, if not for the sake of the algorithm. All right. So anyway, back to our conversation here. Let me jump now to a different subject because we don't have a whole lot of time this week. So I want to make sure I keep things rolling here. Let's talk about attributes. So in our previous playtest adventure, we had a very limited attribute set. We had strength, toughness, coordination, and then we had mind and spirit, which not necessarily the words we're going to go with, but it was something that could work for now. But one of the things that came out was it sounded like people actually wanted more attributes. And we're still getting the feedback on this, so maybe you guys will feel differently. But at least if you talk about our core rules, like the core way the game is played, it sounds like the having 9 attributes really won't be a problem to most folks, and they want to have those other attributes there rather than having them condensed down. And so this is what we're looking at the moment. In the mental abilities, we have intellect, creativity, and willpower. Now, creativity is an interesting one. It's not one you typically see in games, and part of me feels like that's always a disappointment that that's not there. There are many, many situations where the characters are asked to behave in a creative fashion, whether they're coming up with a creative solution to a problem, whether they are performing on stage, whether they're trying to make up a great story. And the truth is that as creative as many role players are, not everybody is a super creative person, right? Or if they are creative, they certainly aren't creative on the fly while everyone's staring at them. And so in general, with role-playing games, one of the things I've always loved about them is it lets you be something you're not in real life. I am not a strong, tough, well-coordinated character in real life at all. In real life, my stats would be pretty terrible in that area. But oh my God, I can swing from chandeliers, I can leap across a crevasse, I can do all sorts of stuff in a role-playing game. And the same is true of some of these things. I like to think that I'm a relatively intelligent guy, but man, isn't it fun to play Mr. Fantastic and be able to come up with a crazy device that's going to save the day? And that's where creativity can come into the game, and it can represent something that maybe isn't 100% natural to you in real life. So I'm going to be looking forward to hearing from folks on what they think about that and what they think about that as an attribute as we're going through it. And then comes willpower. Now, some of you will remember this grouping comes from a bunch of unnecessary research I did into brain function and how the brain works, right? And these pieces kind of fit together in terms of where they come in the brain function. And so that's why I grouped them the way they did. Just completely off the wall facts that, in case you were curious. Zero the Blade was pointing out climbing walls without equipment, right? How do you do it? How do you come up with a creative way up the wall? And maybe the GM might think of something, but you can't, right? So there's cool things you can use with creativity. All right, rolling back here, empathy is another one that comes into play. This is something when you start talking about animal handling, right? Or if you're trying to sense motive, or trying to get someone to trust you, or in a genuine sort of way, empathy comes into play. Then there's presence. Presence has to do with your stage presence. This doesn't necessarily mean charisma. This is what I like about this one. It's not about being charismatic. It's about having presence. Darth Maul has presence, right? But is he charismatic? I don't think so. And I've never liked the idea of Darth Maul having a high charisma, right? And that's the way they generally do it in games. No, but he has huge presence. And that way you can have creatures like a giant creature that has amazing presence. And this is great for things like intimidating someone, or trying to fool them, or trying to put on a performance. Again, all of these things are here with presence, and then awareness. And this has to do with your perception, with noticing changes in your environment, with reacting quickly to something that other people might not notice. And so each of these are grouped according to where a lot of the brain function is and how it works. They're grouped according to, roughly into your body, into your mind. And in this case, we were calling this spirit. It's not the right word. So folks, another question for you. I'm going to give everybody homework. I should just post this as homework for everyone after. I have a worksheet for you to work on after the design journal. What do we call this third one? Do we call it spirit? It's kind of spirit, but kind of isn't. I don't know. We need an idea for that. So give that some thought as you're working through it. So these are the 9 attributes that we're going to start with. Now, will they stay this way? Maybe not. But we're going to start with this because we got to start somewhere, right? So this is what we'll start with. And with that next play test, I've already got this written in. I've got the information there for it. And we'll be taking a look at this. Now, a cool thing that did come up, and we talked about this a little last week, was the idea that you can have what you can do is you can have a rules module that simplifies the game, as well as rules modules that that make it more complex. And someone might have a rules module that's just body, mind, spirit, and those are all the abilities, because you don't need more than that, right? That would make a great, fast playing, simple game that you could absolutely write a rules module for. And maybe this is where we start from in terms of our core, our base point for our stories. All right, the next thing is skills. Now, this skill chart I love. This is by Larona from Discord. It is one of my all-time favorite things that has come out of the Discord discussions. And I got to tell you, it may be too much for some people, but I love the idea that you could take this wheel and just knock levels off of it to create different levels of complexity in your game. To me, that is such an intriguing concept, this idea that you sort of fold your way out into more and more complexities. And then at the farthest edge, you can start getting into things like stunts and tricks and those sorts of powers, right? You can even do it off of the initial levels when you really think about it. But yeah, I just love this. I think there's a few things I might tweak in terms of how I am going to do it, but I'm trying to figure out how to use this. And another piece of homework for everyone is how complex does this look like? Is this terrifying when you look at it? Or is it actually a pretty decent way to present the skills within the game? Now, obviously, it's a little hard maybe to read and pick the ones you want, but man, it sure does do a really good job of highlighting where these different areas are and how they all come together. So this is what I'm using as the foundation for the skills in the work that we're in the next round of play tests that we're going to be doing. So we've got this skill set, we've got the attribute list. I'll go back to that. Let me get back to my attribute list. And then we're also looking at expanding out the combat rules from our quick and dirty rules to something a little more in depth. I will say that the quick and dirty rules aren't too far off from what we're going to be presenting for you guys to try. Armor is going to be protective in that it reduces the damage from attacks. So that's going to be one thing that we're going to keep in place. I will admit that at some point, I intend to write a rule module. If it's not in the core rules, probably be a rule module for armor damage. I've always loved games where armor gets damaged over time. I think it's fun. It's fun to repair your armor and get it back into shape. It's fun to have shields be as disposable as they often were in real combat, so that you bring up the shield, just gets smashed, and halfway through you throw it and you get another one for the next time around. I think that that's going to be a whole lot of fun to see in the game. And, I'm going to add that on. But to start with, though, armor will be, I don't want to say ablative, but it will reduce the damage. So I'm pretty sure ablative implies that the protection goes down as you use it. As far as weapons go, I do see us still having 0 damage weapons. We have that in the quick and dirty rules today. So you might have, say, a dagger that its damage rating is 0, not because it doesn't do any damage, but because its primary purpose is to turn non-lethal damage into lethal damage. So me punching you in the face is relatively non-lethal, not just because I'm not good at fighting, but because punch in the face probably won't kill you unless it's a really lucky hit. However, a dagger to the face is a whole nother story. It changes everything. And so those are the sorts of things that I'm trying to look at as well. With all of this, if you guys remember way back to the very beginning, one of the things that I asked us to do is not take anything for granted, not go into this with the expectation that we had to write this game the same way every other role-playing game is written. Weapons don't all have to do just a basic plus of damage. Maybe we change that. Weapons don't necessarily have to have to hit bonuses. Again, we have to look at how this all works and question why it is the way it is. What I'm seeing for weapons today is that weapons have a couple of different purposes. And one of the reasons you use a weapon is it lets you hit someone at a distance, at range. And the purpose of that is to keep them from hitting you. So a sword, for example, lets me hit you at range without me being right next to you like I would be with a dagger, which is not good because then you can hit me back. The other reason why is that it allows you to use physics to increase the damage of your blow. And so, for example, using the lever of my arm to strike you with my sword, it allows me to increase the damage. It also, through the use of a sharpened edge or a sharpened point allows me to do additional damage that way as well. One of the things that I see is instead of just having, a bunch of, this weapon is a +1 and this is a +4, we will be able to have rules modules where different types of damage have different effects and different types of armor have different levels of protection. This is something I'm really into. Probably won't be in the core rules. Everyone doesn't need to panic. But again, I kind of see it there. And if we simplify that back, weapons are valuable, but they aren't necessarily the be all end all in terms of how they do damage, right? Let me take a look here. There's a comment that came in. And unfortunately, I have to tell you guys, I still haven't figured quite how to get Streamlabs to stream my chat in real time. It's kind of a frustration of mine. So I end up getting all of your comments like a minute or two after I've gotten past the topic, which is part of the reason why I sometimes have a problem with it. But yeah, let me add some more text here. Zero the Blade pointed out crit finishers, a way to get an instant kill, if I understand correctly. I think that that's potentially a thing that could happen, right? I mean, by all means, that's kind of what an open-ended role does, though, is it creates those moments where you get this amazing hit that finishes off a target. Again, I think that as long as we build in enough systems to allow that not to derail the story, that can be a lot of fun, because that's one of the things that happened. And although it's a great adventure, and I forgot to bring the picture with me of it, because I've got to even have a picture of that disastrous moment for me. But in an Earth Dawn game, an open-ended role killed the big bad guy in like the second round of combat. An amazing hit, an unbelievable hit, destroyed the bad guy. I kind of had to rewrite the adventure at that point, a little bit on the fly, because he was not supposed to go down that quickly. He was supposed to escape and continue to hound the heroes for long afterward. So what we have to think about is, how do we cushion that? How do we cushion those moments where you can have the epic moment, but it doesn't bring the entire story to a screeching halt? There's got to be ways that we can do this well. So that is where we're at, folks. I realize that's a fairly large amount of information quickly, but again, thank you to everyone who's playtesting. The rules are out there now for anyone to download. If the last Kickstarter update was open to the world, and I'm going to start sharing this with the world, anyone who wants to download and give us feedback can. But, for those of you who are the backers, either on Kickstarter or in the late pledge store, by all means, we want to hear your feedback, and we'll be tracking that information as it comes in, because we're definitely weighting things slightly towards you guys, because we want to make sure that, you're part of this process as thanks for your support of making this happen. As I mentioned, by the way, in one of the other notes, we do have art coming. Russell's working on some cool art for us. So someday soon here, I'm going to have some art to share, and I'm very excited about that. And in the meantime, keep playtesting, keep throwing those dice, and keep filling us in on how it's going. We can't wait to hear from you guys. So take care, good night, and I hope that everybody has a great game.